this judge who sits on the tribunal who's going to be judging the guilt or innocence of a Catholic school trustee self-identifies as, quote, an LGBT activist, end
Yes.
quote. So he identifies he's an activist and an advocate for the LGBT political agenda, and he's one of the judges, amazingly.
Toronto Catholic District School Board trustee Mike Grande is in hot water these days. In fact, he is currently on trial by the Ontario College of Teachers Discipline Committee. Wow, that sounds really serious. So what crime did Mr. Grande allegedly commit? Well, he believes that, shockers, Catholic schools should be true to Catholic doctrine, and apparently the so-called radical queer community disagrees. And now it would seem that the Ontario College of Teachers is embracing a woke agenda with the ultimate goal of stripping Grande of his teacher's license. Absolutely amazing. And joining me now for more on this story is Jack Fonseca, the Director of Political Operations at the Campaign Life Coalition. Hey, how you doing there today, Jack?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for joining us. Now, before we get into all the nitty-gritty, can you tell our viewers, Jack, what is the crux of the matter when it comes to this prosecution of Mike Grande in the first place?
Yeah, sure. Mike Grande is a Catholic school trustee who was democratically elected by the voters in Ward 7 to represent them at the school board. And as you know, the Toronto Catholic School Board is a religious school board whose purpose is to instill the Catholic faith, including Catholic moral and doctrinal teachings, in the next generation of children, in its students. When the Ontario government put forward a directive that school boards should adopt a code of conduct policy that would include gender identity and gender expression as prohibited grounds for non-discrimination, he objected because, of course, the Catholic Church rejects the theories of gender identity and gender expression and the transgender lifestyle. It's not in keeping with the Catholic faith, with Catholic moral teachings about human sexuality. He objected to it, and for objecting to it, he got the ire of the entire LGBT mob and the media attacking him and demanding that he be fired, that he resign, that he be punished in various ways. So they've got 3 different attacks they've launched against him. One, they censored him at the school board level with an illegal vote after they had acquitted him from a complaint, found him not guilty, which in itself was illegal. The gay activist filed a complaint to the College of Teachers to suspend a teaching license, which he has never used. He's actually never taught as a teacher. He just happens to hold a license. He's never taught in a classroom, never had a teaching contract, and does not now. And they've also launched a human rights complaint against him. So he is facing the full wrath of the LGBT mob and the left-wing media to destroy him for not bending the knee to their wishes. And all he's done is defend the Catholic faith.
And Jack, there was I guess a small victory, wasn't there, as you reported? The tribunal of judges, one of them is an individual by the name of Anthony Gehan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I guess all you need to know about this individual, he is self-described as, quote, a queer person of color, end quote. And at the hearing, he made a point of saying that the proper way to refer to him was they, them. He also requested to be addressed by his preferred transgender pronoun of MX instead of Mr.
It's bizarre, you know. And you know, I should say he also in his writings, this judge who sits on the tribunal who's going to be judging the guilt or innocence of a Catholic school trustee self-identifies as, quote, an LGBT activist,
Yes.
end quote. So he identifies he's an activist and an advocate for the LGBT political agenda, and he's one of the judges, amazingly. And you know, for him to then say, stand in front of, it's virtual. It's the hearing was via Zoom. It wasn't in person. But for him to, here you've got Mike DelGrande, the trustee, being persecuted. He's being brought to this trial because he refused to bend the knee to these transgender pronouns and whatnot. And the judge is saying, you need to refer to me as mix and they and them and use the very transgender pronouns that you're on trial for.
What staggers me, Jack, is given his baggage, given that we know he's an activist on gender identity, gender expression, and so on, how did he even meet the benchmark to be on this tribunal to decide Mr. DelGrande's fate in the first place?
Well, somehow the College of Teachers, the Ontario Teachers College Act requires that at least one of the judicial panel members is a teacher, a licensed teacher and member of the College of Teachers. And they somehow deemed that this guy was representative of teachers at large, of the teaching profession in Ontario. And it was really such a miscarriage of justice because, not only the things that you've mentioned already, but he also, in his writings, he wrote, quote, "The nature of education is and will always be inherently political," end quote. And he wrote that he learned not to trust school board administration or school administration generally. He wrote that he is informed by the school of relativism, the moral relativism, and that there is no true moral truth. I mean, those are the words he wrote in his paper. Quote, "There is no true moral truth." So he's standing in judgment over a Catholic elected school trustee, presiding over their beliefs. And so it's really unbelievable. And the victory, you mentioned earlier that there's a small victory, and that is Trustee DelGrande's legal counsel prudently requested the recusal of G-Than from the judicial panel. He said, obviously there is a conflict of interest, or at the very least, a reasonable apprehension of bias to the average person, knowing his statements, what he's written, and how he describes himself as, quote, an LGBT activist, a queer person of color, and knowing the charges against Trustee DelGrande as a faithful Catholic, would recognize or perceive that there is a reasonable apprehension of bias. And so he made, the legal counsel for DelGrande made an excellent, very persuasive argument, bringing up all these things that about G-Than. And even the College of Teachers' own legal counsel concurred that he describes himself as an activist. And once that happened, G-Than had been at first fighting it and arguing why he could be impartial. But once the college's own legal counsel concurred with DelGrande's lawyer, then he gave up and recused himself. Begrudgingly, very, very begrudgingly. They said the rules, because we began with a licensed teacher, or the hearing began with a licensed teacher, it doesn't say that it has to end with a licensed teacher, and therefore we're on fair ground to continue even without G-Than.
Gotcha.
So it will continue, and there's going to be about 10 days in the hearing.
You really address the issue very superbly in your article, and I'll quote verbatim, where you say, "Please pray for Mike's legal counsel to succeed in persuading the remaining panel judges that, number one, that Trustee DelGrande was within his rights to defend Catholic teaching, two, that the college has no jurisdiction to regulate the free speech rights of democratically elected school board trustees, and three, that he's found not guilty of teacher misconduct, especially given that he was in a school board meeting, not teaching in a classroom." I think you laid it out perfectly there. My question is, are you hopeful that Mr. DelGrande is going to get a fair shake by these remaining two judges?
I'm hopeful, although the fact that they allowed G-Than onto the judicial tribunal panel itself tends to indicate that there's bias in the college itself. They know this guy.
Yeah.
They know what he stands for. They know he's an LGBT activist. They know he identifies as an LGBT activist, that he believes education is political. And they chose him nonetheless to represent the teaching profession in Ontario. So that speaks to me of the possibility that the college has poisoned this from the start. So I am hopeful that they will be persuaded by the very skillful lawyer that Mike Delgrand has hired, Dr. Charles Lugosi, and that they will veer away from that course, from a rigged outcome that was predetermined before the hearing even started. And I think it was. I think they decided beforehand, we're going to get this guy. No one stands up to the LGBT agenda. No one stands up to gender identity theory and gets away with it. We're going to make an example of them so that other elected trustees and other elected politicians don't get away with it. But hopefully the persuasive arguments of the lawyer will convince them otherwise, that no, we just can't do that. And we don't have the jurisdiction to do that. You think about that. Yeah. Mike Delgrand was not a teacher in a classroom speaking to students. He was at a school board meeting fulfilling his obligations to the voters who elected him as a democratically elected school board politician, to advocate for their beliefs. And they obviously agree with his beliefs because they elected him. And they elected him again with, I think, 54 or 56% of the total vote, a total landslide victory in the recent municipal election. So he's doing the job that the voters elected him to do. He's not a teacher. He doesn't have a teaching contract. What the hell business does the Teachers College have policing the speech of an elected official on a school
Jack.
board?
That's what it boils down to, isn't it? It's all about compelled speech. If you do not say this, if you do not agree with this, therefore you are a bigot, you are a transphobe, fill in whatever word you want, and you will be dealt with pretty much economic penalization via losing your job or position. One last question, Jack, because this really is a fascinating case. I would argue that if Mike Delgrand is found guilty, if he's disciplined, then this is proof positive, I think, that Catholic schools are simply Catholic in name only. The next thing you know, the drag queen story time will be rolling into your local Catholic district school board. Your final thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, I agree. If it is a rule that Catholic school trustees are not allowed to advocate for Catholic moral teachings, then, well, and if they go along with that and adhere to that ruling and self-censor, then we don't have a Catholic school system anymore. Yeah. It's just it has a cross above the door, and that's as far as it goes. There's no actual Catholicism that's given to the children.
We depend on you for our funding. Can you please go to rebelinvestigates.com? That's rebelinvestigates.com. And if you're able to, make a donation so we can continue to bring you the investigative reporting that you like so much. Thank you in advance.